Saturday evening. The twins were having a sleepover at Grandma's and Leo said he'd be working late at the office. Again. Typical weekend plans for us these days. I settled onto the couch to finish up a logo design, my laptop open, background noise from the TV droning on. That's when I heard Leo's voice through the speakers, his car's Bluetooth still connected from our earlier call. He wasn't alone. A woman's silky tones sliced through my concentration. "I can't wait to get you alone this weekend," she purred. My heart stuttered. Had to be a misunderstanding, right? But Leo's response shattered any doubt. "Me too, babe. Jane's sister is taking the kids. We'll have the whole weekend to ourselves. No interruptions." The woman giggled. "I've got a surprise planned for you." Leo groaned. "If it's anything like last time, I'm the luckiest guy alive." Their flirtatious back and forth faded into a meaningless buzz in my ears. The logo design blurred on the screen as hot tears burned my eyes. How long had this been going on? Jane was my best friend, like a sister to me. Had she known? And what did he mean by "like last time"? Rage and humiliation flooded through me in sickening waves. Leo's voice jarred me back. "I gotta go. Talk to you soon, gorgeous." The call ended, leaving me alone with the hideous truth ringing in my ears. My husband, my partner of 20 years, the man I loved and trusted with every fiber of my being, had been lying and cheating, betraying me in the cruelest way. In a trance-like state, I paced the living room. Part of me couldn't comprehend it. Not Leo. Not my Leo. Maybe there was an explanation, a misunderstanding. But those words, his tone, left no doubt. White-hot anger propelled me into action. I dumped Leo's messages from the past 6 months, poured over his schedule, emails, everything. The evidence was damning. Hushed phone conversations, extended business trips, deleted texts and emails from some number called WorkStudy98. My head spun as screenshots and details of Leo's sordid affair or affairs materialized before my eyes like a sinister polygon ripping apart our life. Sick to my stomach, I held back vomit as I uncovered more deception, lies about his income, secret bank accounts, stolen freelance earnings. When had my life become such a twisted nightmare? Dry heaving into the kitchen sink, only one thought coursed through my mind. That son of a bitch is going to pay for this. In the aftermath of that horrific discovery, everything seemed tainted. Every memory reframed through a lens of suspicion. I found myself scrutinizing Leo's every move, every word, for further signs of deceit. At first he played it cool, same old routine. I watched him like a hawk, jaw clenched whenever he disappeared into his study to work late, as if his smug lies weren't a festering wound in our marriage. One night after Ethan went to bed, I confronted Leo about a mysterious charge on our credit card statement, an upscale hotel downtown. "Just a little staycation for us," he said with a wink. "Thought it'd be a nice surprise for your birthday." My stomach turned at his casual dishonesty. "Cut the crap, Leo. I know about the affairs." His expression didn't falter, just that same smug look he'd been giving me for weeks. "Oh yeah? And what proof do you have?" I flung the document with hotel reservations and incriminating texts in his face. "Enough to bury you." Leo's mask slipped, a sneer twisting his lips as he grabbed my wrist in a crushing grip. "Listen here, you crazy—" Ethan's footsteps in the hallway made him release me, his tone shifting in an instant. "Everything okay, honey? Just working through something with Mom." I kept silent, massaging my tender wrist as Ethan mumbled good night and disappeared into his room. Leo fixed me with a cold stare. "This isn't over," he hissed. "You'll regret sticking your nose where it doesn't belong." Over the days that followed, his behavior became more erratic, blustering one moment, subtle intimidation the next. Normally I'd brush off his passive-aggressive crap, but now it chilled me to the bone. Ethan started mentioning odd things too, seeing his dad at the mall when he claimed a late meeting, unexplained gifts like an expensive watch. Something was seriously off. The final straw came when I found a crumpled receipt in Leo's pants pocket while doing laundry, an intimate package addressed to Donna Martin at some P.O. box in the city. My blood boiled as I confronted him again. This time he didn't even try to deny it, sneering, "What, you thought you were the only one allowed secrets?" As if his infidelity, his betrayal, justified anything. Face contorted in a snarl, he grabbed the receipt and ripped it to shreds. "Listen good, you ungrateful." That's when Ethan burst in, his eyes wild. "Dad, what is going on? Why are you yelling at Mom like that?" Leo froze. But the disgust in our son's expression said it all. I seized the opportunity, voice dripping with venom. "That's an excellent question, Ethan. Why don't you ask your father about all the lying, the cheating? Maybe he can explain why he thinks it's okay to treat me like garbage after everything I've done for this family." The shock on Leo's face quickly morphed to fury, then desperation, but the damage was done. Ethan had seen behind the facade, into the sick truth of his father's depravity. "No. Ethan, wait, let me explain." But our son was already storming out, his footsteps thundering up the stairs. Leo's shoulders slumped as the weight of his sins crashed down around him. I stood tall, energized by the prospect of total obliteration, both professional and personal, for this hollow shell of a man I once loved. He may have thought he held all the cards, but the true reckoning was only just beginning. After that explosive confrontation, the war was on. I spent every spare moment gathering ammunition to decimate Leo, hard evidence to ensure my revenge hit him where it hurt most. First step, track his every move. I spent a couple $100 on one of those portable GPS trackers and slipped it into his car's utility compartment. Sure enough, it lit up locations all over town. Hotels, sleazy motels, even a P.O. box in an industrial part of the city. Next, I went full stalker mode on his digital life. The guy was hopelessly lazy with passwords, and on passwords alone, I unearthed a trove of smoking guns, emails to jadeharlow@hotmail.com, mail to jadeharlow@hotmail.com, discussing meetups, hotel confirmations under fake names, even a PayPal account linked to an Ashley Madison subscription. The real prize, though? Recovering his deleted messages and photos using some file-to-reveal software. I'll never unsee those images. Leo tangled up half-naked with some redhead on a cheap motel room floor, her legs wrapped around him like a Venus flytrap, or the incriminating video attachment simply titled, "For Your Eyes Only." I didn't have the stomach to click it. Every time that lecherous smirk of his flashed on my screen, every time I saw those coarse missives detailing his plans to bury it deep in some mistress, I boiled with fresh rage. Growing up, my dad always called me his ball-buster. He had no idea how right he was. I compiled the most irrefutable proof into a series of binders, labeling and documenting every last shred of Leo's indiscretions, time-stamped, geo-tracked, the whole 9 yards. No detail was too small, no exchange too insignificant to include. With everything laid out in neat, damning order, I could finally see the full, sickening scope of Leo's betrayal. The drinking buddy, Gary, he always complained about working late with. Yet another web of lies concealing a seedy fling. His constant business trips out of town. Sleazy hookups orchestrated with ruthless precision. My heart shriveled at the thought of how long this must have been going on. 5 years? 10? Had I been such a naive, love-struck fool all this time while he paraded around defiling our marriage bed with God knows how many women? Just imagining Leo's cocky smirk as he spun me lie after lie, thinking he could gaslight me forever, it made me see red. After catching him in so many acts of deception, observing his true nature up close, like some kind of coldly anthropological study, I'd never been more sure of anything. He was lower than a scorpion's belly, a soulless sack of narcissistic impulses and entitlement masquerading as a man. Well, this man was about to learn a brutally hard lesson about actions and consequences. With every dirty text and financial paper trail printed out in triplicate, cross-referenced and compiled with ruthless meticulousness, I had all the ammunition I needed. Phase 1 was complete. I closed the final binder, my hands steady, adrenaline thrumming through me with the giddy promise of absolute devastation soon to come. Poor Leo didn't even know the nightmare that awaited him. I was the cheated on, manipulated, abused spouse here. I'd earned the right to rain unholy terror down upon his miserable existence, and I was going to enjoy every single minute. With my mountain of evidence prepared, it was time to rip the Band-Aid off this putrid marriage once and for all. I figured the big family dinner was as good an occasion as any to unleash hell, a nice Norman Rockwell setting to go nuclear on Leo's unfaithful ass. As usual, he played the caring husband and father to perfection all evening, doting on Ethan and making small talk about weekend plans over pot roast like nothing was amiss. I forced myself to engage, bile rising in my throat with every disingenuous smile he flashed in my direction. Finally, when Ethan took his plate to the living room, alone at last, I fixed Leo with a pointed stare and cleared my throat. "You know, it's really amazing," I began in an even tone, "the kinds of things modern technology can uncover these days." Leo paused, fork halfway to his mouth. "What are you talking about?" I slid one of the binders across the table with a loud thump. "I'm talking about finally seeing the truth, Leo. Every last lie, every despicable act of betrayal. all right here in black and white. He paled, the binder's ominous presence looming over him. Cora, let's not do anything rash. Rash? I laughed bitterly. You don't get to play innocent after what you've done. I flipped open the binder, letting graphic photo evidence tell the story. How about we start with this Geneva? Or would you prefer I call her Work Study 98? Leo cringed as I slapped down incriminating selfies of his mistress, a scantily clad redhead plastered all over him. That's just the tip of the iceberg, I went on coldly. I've got everything here. The accounts, the payments, the God knows how many women you've stuck it to behind my back over these years. He tried to interject, but I barreled through, decades of resentment bubbling over as I pulled out more evidence. And let's not forget dear old Gina, my closest friend, may I remind you? The one whose sister's lake house you snuck off to for your dirty little weekend? You remember how broken up she was about that mysterious fallout in our inner circle? Well, here's a big old reminder. With a thick smack, I dropped a rambling email where Gina had confronted Leo about his indiscretions, begging him to make things right with me. I could see the wind leave his sails as the truth piled up before him like an avalanche of sins. You make me sick, I snarled, standing over him. After 20 years together, after I sacrificed my career to raise our family, you repay me with nothing but disrespect and lies. He shook his head, eyes downcast. When he spoke, it was barely above a murmur. I haven't been happy for a long time. My heart stopped. This was it, the moment of ultimate denial or culpability. I steeled myself for more empty excuses, more gaslighting, only to be stunned into silence when he finally met my gaze, his next words sinking like a lead weight. You're right, Cora. I've been unfaithful in more ways than I can recount. His eyes were frighteningly vacant, cold. I checked out of this marriage a long time ago. That cavalier admission, devoid of even an ounce of remorse, snapped something inside me. I saw him for the empty, depraved shell he truly was, just a void dressed up in an Armani suit. There was no more sadness or resignation left, only a blazing inferno engulfing everything in its path. I wasted no more breath on this soulless husk. With a voice as hard as steel, I made my demand. Get the hell out of my house, tonight. Consider this the firing shot, Leo. You're about to learn why they call me the ballbuster. And for the first time in our marriage, I realized this was just the start of his torment. With Leo banished from the house, I could finally breathe and start methodically dismantling every aspect of his miserable existence. No more Mrs. Nice Girl, tiptoeing around his fragile ego. It was scorched earth from here on out. First step, let his employers at Robertson & Scott get a nice glimpse into his company man persona. I fired off an anonymous email to their HR department with all subjects line, respectful workplace violation, inappropriate employee conduct. Inside, I included a delicately curated selection of emails, visuals, and documentation on Leo's proclivities for inappropriate workplace dalliances, just enough to raise a big, obese red flag. His tireless loyalty to the firm was about to be called into some serious moral questioning. Next, I penned an eloquent group message to both my family and Leo's, taking great care with my word choice. No crass allegations or dramatics, just an understated listing of undeniable facts. The deposits and payments to adult websites under various aliases, the hotel confirmation receipts corresponding with corporate credit card charges, and, of course, the utterly rancid messages and videos detailing his lecherous trysts. I added a simple preamble. In light of recent events, and with a heavy heart, I present the following evidence of my husband's chronic infidelity and deception. I ask that you please respect my family's privacy during this profoundly difficult period. With the clinical tap of the send button, any shred of Leo's remaining dignity went flushing down the proverbial toilet along with the email. As I watched the incriminating evidence go pinging out across the digital ether, an odd sense of calm settled over me, like I'd finally regained control over the narrative of my life. Leo had taken enough already. Now it was time for him to start losing everything. I didn't fret over how our son Ethan might take the news. Hell, knowing Leo's true face now, he'd likely get the schadenfreude tingles watching it all burn down. Maybe for once, I could count on that sullen teen to be in my corner. With the professional and familial napalm launched, I turned my sights to Leo's lofty social status, the lavish cocktail circuit he so loved prancing around, slapping backs and peacocking about like the smug master of his laughably bogus empire. A few clicks later, and an anonymous Dropbox torrent went rocketing across his elite country club and media circles, brimming with all the salacious evidence a person could ever want. Let the public tar and feathering begin. With all the messy legal, professional, and personal bombs planted, all that was left now was sitting back to revel in the fallout. I could practically see it already. Leo being frog-marched out of Robertson and Scott under a chorus of shocked whispers, his family shunning him once and for all, his fraudulent facade crumbling into a kaleidoscope of public humiliation. This was more than just retribution. It was a complete, systematic deconstruction of the sad little fiction he'd been performing his whole life, stripping away every ill-gotten laurel and Potemkin plaudits to reveal him for the vapid, unfaithful snake he truly was. And I was going to bathe in every gut-wrenching second of his undoing. Because while he may have obliterated my heart and trust, I sure as hell was going to pulverize what he held most dear. His wealth, his status, his phony reputation. As I sipped a glass of celebratory Cabernet that evening, I couldn't wait to start collecting the shrapnel. The great Leo Bennett was about to come crashing down in spectacular flames, and I had a front-row seat to every gut-wrenching moment. The days after my precision strike attack on Leo's life were like a slow-motion car wreck, a perversely entertaining implosion as his world crumbled around him, piece by obliterated piece. It started with a trickle, like the first few pebbles dislodging before an avalanche. A voicemail from his boss at Robertson and Scott, tone clipped and ominous. "Leo, we need to discuss some disturbing matters that have come to light. Please clear your schedule for a meeting first thing tomorrow morning." I could picture his cocky smirk contorting into panic as the other shoe began dropping. Anonymous emails deluged his inbox from family members, his brother disowning him, aunts and uncles decrying his profound moral sickness. Hell, I even heard his silver-haired mother left a voicemail calling him a goddamn disappointment, before dissolving into racking sobs of dismay. Oh, how the mighty were falling. Over the next few days, the punishing blows just kept raining down, each one whittled for maximum humiliation and devastation. A scathing letter from the club board informing him of his immediate termination from the country club, revoking all privileges and banning him from premises. So long, taxpayer-subsidized back-patting sessions with all the other arrogant windbags. An email blast to our entire social circle from Cheryl Langdon, queen bee of the upper crust. In light of recent events, the Langdon family will no longer be associating with the Bennetts in any social or professional capacity. I could only imagine the horrified pearl clutching that bombshell set off. And then, the true chef's kiss, a termination notice from Robertson and Scott. Turns out my anonymous evidence was enough to violate about 16 different workplace codes and kickstart a full internal audit. Oopsie, daddy warbucks. Goodbye, seven-figure windfalls, hello, unemployment line. 3 weeks ago, Leo had been strutting around like a feudal lord with an endless night of reckless debauchery sprawled out before him. Now, he was a shambling, disgraced husk, assets frozen, office keycard deactivated, personal and professional life in smoking crater. And I drank in every last detail of his comeuppance, that first jolt of shocked bewilderment crashing into realization across his puffy, self-satisfied face. Gone was the smug entitlement and egotistical sneers as the stark truth set in. He was nothing. Not a captain of industry or society, Pasha. Just another shameless creep unmasked for the pathological liar he was. Within days, he went from Westchester elite to subterranean, a scorned piece of human detritus. And boy did I make sure to bask in that reversal of fortunes. I asked the realtor to triple list our family home, just a little extra kick while I was down. Venomous satisfaction oozed through me as the old boys club shunned and ghosted him en masse, stripped of his precious status symbols. "How's that taste of the bottom feel, darling?" I taunted whenever he came slinking around for a McNeed's handout, food stamps in hand. "After your selfish, shameful behavior, you should just be grateful I'm not burying you in litigation on top of everything else." Poor Leo didn't know the first thing about humility or consequences. Not until I jackhammered them straight into his dilapidated, arrogant soul. With the canapés, Courvoisiers, and cookie-cutter socialite admirers gone, all that remained was a hollowed-out, flailing narcissist racing towards that long-overdue reckoning. And I was going to ensure it arrived with a steel-toed boot squarely to his pathetic jewels. With Leo reduced to a scorned, jobless pariah, it was time to deliver the final, crippling blows and cement my total victory. First up, nailing down the divorce proceedings to rip away what little he had left, his financial security, and hold over me and Ethan. I researched every shark divorce attorney in the tri-state area before settling on Marcus Goldsmith, a pit bull of a lawyer who'd make even Stevenson look like a Labrador puppy. Within our first half-hour consult, I knew I'd made the right call. This guy euphemized words like merciless and debilitating. Mr. Bennett's admitted infidelity already tilts matters heavily in your favor, Marcus said, affecting a look of faux sympathy that didn't reach his dead shark eyes, as does the, shall we say, expansive documentation you've provided. He dropped a loud thump of a briefcase stuffed with my compiled evidence onto the desk. I had to suppress a vindicated grin, Leo's sins distilled into a gloating leather folio. With your service as a devoted spouse and mother, the precedent is clear. You're entitled to a substantial portion of assets and full custody. Marcus smacked his palm on the table for emphasis. The question is just how much pound of flesh you want to extract from Mr. Bennett's indiscretions. At those words, Leo's smarmy, entitled sneer flashed before my eyes, the same look he'd given me all those years, deluded in thinking he could keep duping me forever. Suddenly, bleeding him dry for everything didn't seem excessive enough. Take it all, I said through gritted teeth. The house, the assets, every last penny, and full custody goes without saying. Marcus's smile was downright predatory. My dear Mrs. Bennett, we're going to become very well acquainted in the coming months. And so began a beautiful working relationship, with my new pit bull attorney leaving no stone unturned in dismantling Leo's rotten, deceitful life. We bent over backwards digging up every shred of financial infidelity, hidden accounts, bogus purchases, shell company transactions routing his freelance gigs back to assets I never knew existed. All fair game for restitution. During one particularly heated deposition, Leo actually had the temerity to snarl some garbled prenup defense about assets attained after our marriage. I thought Marcus was going to rupture an organ, he guffawed so hard. Let me get this straight. My lawyer wheezed through pronounced chuckles. You're trying to claim ignorance over illegal financial assets that were explicitly funded by your repeated acts of adultery? He slapped down the stack of records, more evidence of Leo's depravity than the collective works of the Marquise de Sade. You pitiful, delusional bastard. Even if the prenup clauses didn't get nullified by your egregious violations of ethics and morality, the assets themselves are ill-gotten criminal proceeds. The blood drained from Leo's face as Marcus kept twisting the knife. This is what you're going to prison for in a just society, you simpering coward. I sipped from my water bottle, not even trying to hide my cocksure grin, as the once proud patriarch sputtered through more feeble protests. Marcus kept eviscerating every objection like an orca demolishing a snapping guppy. By the time we entered the final custody hearing, Leo's legal team had been thoroughly neutered. He sat there motionless as the judge, another hard-nosed sister of mercy in robes, issued her ruling. Mr. Bennett's pattern of blatant deception, infidelity, and financial misconduct leave no ambiguities in this court's mind. Full custody is awarded to Mrs. Bennett, effective immediately. Mr. Bennett is also ordered to pay restitution equaling. I zoned out as she listed off obscene sums and assets. All that mattered was I'd achieved totality. The house, the lack of trust fund scams, they were all mine now. And most importantly, Ethan wouldn't have to endure his father's toxic influence anymore. Leo shuffled out of the courtroom, a shattered, hollow husk. I flashed him a cruel smile, bathing in total victory. Don't worry, honey. Thanks to me, you've got plenty of free time to sow those wild oats again. 6 months later, the embers of that raging inferno had dimmed, giving way to the satisfying calm of a new normal. Gone were the dark clouds of Leo's betrayal and our toxic marriage, dissolved like grease-stained runoff after a torrential downpour. I stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new downtown loft and took a deep, contented breath. This open-concept dream workspace was the first fun investment I'd made after the divorce spoils arrived, a reward for surviving the emotional napalm and emerging stronger. My freshly minted design agency was already thriving, bolstered by a string of high-profile contracts and glowing media profiles, casting me as a modern Renaissance woman. No longer was I just Leo Bennett's fashion plate hausfrau, but a titan of industry and single motherhood in my own right. Of course, it helped having the sordid details of Leo's disgraceful downfall splashed across every society blog from Westchester to the Hamptons. Sympathy and money poured in from every big-spending wife and girlfriend who projected their own fears onto my cautionary tale. The calls and emails never ceased. "You're such an inspiration for the way you handled that snake. I would have burned his belongings on the front lawn. No more Mrs. Nice Girl. Love your attitude." I lapped up the adulation and commiserations, even striking up a fun content partnership where I dished delicious stories of the ultimate revenge rom for their thirsty audiences. Folks couldn't get enough of the drama, served piping hot. In the midst of my hard-launched career renaissance, though, I made sure to keep Ethan's world stable and safe. The poor kid had been through absolute hell with the divorce and exposure of his dad's bottomless dishonor. I'll never forget the pained look on his face after that courthouse showdown when it all finally sank in. How could someone he'd idolized for so long turn out to be such a grotesque failure of a man? A schmuck wrapped in an Armani suit? Those first few weeks, Ethan barely spoke or made eye contact, walking around in a teenage stupor of disillusionment and disappointment. My heart broke watching him struggle to process such a profound shattering of his world. So I went full-blown smothering mom mode, pancakes and smoothies for breakfast, an endless tickler of new Lego sets and video games to assemble and conquer, martial arts classes to vent any lingering frustrations. Thanks to the divorce settlement windfalls, I could give him every opportunity his lying sack of a father never bothered providing. Eventually, the light returned to Ethan's eyes. His usual boisterous, class clown personality resurfaced as he adjusted to a new family dynamic. Just me as the steady, reliable parent, while his dad became a dark anecdote, a pitiable punchline signifying karmic justice. "You really burned that loser to the ground, huh, Mom?" he'd often say with a teasing grin. I just winked conspiratorially. Only got what he deserved after how he did us dirty. Still, there were moments the pangs of betrayal seized me, making me taste the tang of molten bile and heartache all over again. Unwrapping old boyfriend hoodies or finding dog-eared Father's Day cards. On those nights, I'd pour myself a bourbon and cry it out on my balcony under gauzy city lights. But those waves grew shallower, less consuming as time passed, and my life bloomed in glorious new directions. Fresh priorities filled the vacancies Leo's transgressions once hollowed into my soul. I took pride watching Ethan mature into a strong, compassionate young man whose moral fiber outstripped his bio-dad's diminutive character by orders of magnitude. My business kept soaring, with an ever-expanding roster of high-powered clientele who valued my bold perspectives and resilient work ethic above all else. As for Leo, I stopped checking in after those first few months of wallowing and moaning on the fringes, begging for scraps from our old life. Last I heard through the rumor mill, he'd taken some mailroom job in Philly and crawled into his childhood bedroom in his mom's gamely townhome. If he was smart, he'd stay well out of my white-hot orbit. Unlike our marriage, I don't suffer disgraces or trespasses lightly. Not anymore.